tell you my favorite thing about Pierre Poilievre, and I've said this before, and I'd like your reaction to it. I like him on policy. I like his personality. I like that it's sober-minded. I like he's a good communicator. I think he's pretty smart, actually. I think he understands things like monetary policy better than 95% of people, certainly better than our current finance minister. If you say, what's your favorite policy, Ezra? It's not actually a policy. My favorite thing about Pierre Poilievre, and Andrew, I'd like your thought on this, is that he won't like this word, but he abuses the mainstream media. Not viciously or heartlessly, but he's a little bit mean on purpose. No one thinks he's sucking up to the media, neither the public nor the media. And he's not shy about dropping the gloves and smacking them. Sometimes it's subtle, like when he was chewing the apple in the orchard, challenging bad faith questions from just some local reporter. But other times it is very strategic, like a couple of weeks ago when CTV doctored a video and, to splice together different comments to make a sentence Pierre Poilievre never said. Poilievre not only said, I'm not talking to anyone from CTV, I'm not talking to anyone from their owner, Bell, and Bell is a questionable company and their lobbyists are cut off. And it was a real showdown. And it basically said, I am making an enemy out of Canada's largest private broadcaster. I'm going to fight them harder than anyone has ever fought them before. I'm going to question their CEO's pay package. I'm going to point out that their debt is almost junk debt level. That's how rough I'm going to be because CTV was rough with me. Suck on it. And he did that, and it worked. They came out with a ironic apology, and then a day later realized it wasn't enough. They came out with a more groveling apology, fired the two people involved, and he still hasn't forgiven them. I love this. I love this as much as I love his carbon tax repeal point. Andrew, what do you think of my little rant?
I see it as being him not viewing as sacred cows things that the Laurentian elites claim should be treated as sacred cows. And I think this is not to say he has a disrespect for institutions, but his respect for institutions has to be earned. He's not going to avoid criticizing the Bank of Canada governor just because, you're not supposed to do it. He's not going to avoid criticizing the Parliamentary Press Gallery because, you're not supposed to do it. If these groups want respect, if they want to be treated like grown-ups, they have to earn that. And I think that's where I would say what he's doing really falls into. And at the end of the day, I don't think Canadians are viewing institutions in a way that suggests they should be treated with kid gloves either. We've seen trust in institutions of all kinds across the world has been at an all-time low. And you may remember when you and I were reporting on the World Economic Forum in Davos this year, you weren't there at the time, but I ran into Christine Lagarde, who's the head of the European Central Bank. And I said, the theme this year, Ms. Lagarde, is rebuilding trust. How are you going to get, and I hadn't even gotten the question out. And she said, well, I'm not taking questions right now. I'm in a quiet period. And that's true of the Davos elites. It's true of the legacy media in Canada. It's true of the Bank of Canada. These people do not believe that they should have to take questions from ordinary folks. And Poilievre is saying, listen, I'm going to just call you on that. And I think that's resonating with Canadians who have had enough of these groups and institutions too.
I think there's a phrase, turnaround is fair play, turnabout is fair play. And I look at the criticism and the abuse, frankly, and the unfairness that Rebel News has been treated with, that True North was treated. You and I were in court together in 2019. We were both in the same hearing fighting for our right to get into the Debates Commission. In fact, the case is known as Lawton versus Canada, if you look how it's categorized. That was a wonderful victory for both of us. But look at how we were abused. We had to run to court to get our constitutional rights. Look at how both entities are routinely disparaged, ad boycotts. So I think Poilievre, he's not going as far as that, but he's saying, well, why should CTV be immune from criticism? And why can't I poke at the owners there? I mean, I hate Bell because I have their cell phone and I'm charged their outrageous prices and their customer service is non-existent. Why can't Pierre Poilievre use that? Is that a little bit unfair to take on CTV? Maybe a teeny tiny, but the reason I love all of this, Andrew, here's why. It's not just because I like to see left-wing journalists taken down a peg. It's not just that I like to see people who are used to playing offense play defense once in a while. Here's why that is the most important thing to me about Pierre Poilievre. Because I know that if he's willing to lose the potential friendship and personal relationship with CTV, I know he will never fool himself into thinking that if I just abandon this principle, CTV will like me. Because that's what Erin O'Toole and Andrew Scheer did. You mentioned before that the Conservative Party used to actually edit their platform because some reporters mean to them. I know in my bones Pierre Poilievre will not succumb to the peer pressure of the media party because he's the one on the attack, skewering them. That's my favorite thing about him, Andrew. I'll stop rambling on that subject, but give me one last word and we'll keep on to other stuff.
I think you're right. And I think it means that he's being utterly true and consistent. And look, one of the core theses of my book, the core thesis, I'd say, is that he has been a consistent champion of his form of conservatism since going back to his teenage years and certainly his early 20s. I refer in the book a couple of times to that essay he wrote for the Magna competition when he was, I think, 2021 of as Prime Minister I Would. And his title was Building Canada Through Freedom. And I think more recently, it's germane to point out how his message in the leadership race did not change after he became the leader. He was still talking about defunding the CBC. He was still talking about standing up to the media. He was still talking about all of the core red meat issues that drove him to victory in the leadership race afterwards. And what we're seeing now after a year of polling on this, it's been, 2 years since he became the Conservative leader, it's working. And no one can say that this has been a failed strategy on his part because it isn't really a strategy. It's just who he is.
I think you're right about that. I mean, as you point out in the book, I've known him for a while. He was my communications director when I myself had a very brief run for Parliament in a by-election in Calgary Southwest. So, I mean, I remember him when he was just out of college. The guy was then the same as he is now. And we can never know what the future will bring. A person could always change. But I think past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Hey, I want to say one more thing because I was thinking about this the other day about the truckers and obviously the Trucker Convoy. And you wrote a best-selling book on that as well. You've got some great books out there, by the way.
That was the Freedom Convoy, the inside story of 3 weeks that shook the world.
That did very well. That book was a bestseller.
That was literally the #1 book in Canada for 8 weeks, despite being ignored by the media and banned from Indigo.
Yeah, I'm so glad you wrote that book, and I'm so glad that it did so well because there's always a battle over who gets to write the history books, right? And that certainly was a central part of the Trucker Convoy. You could see that Trudeau and the regime media wanted to write the January 6th narrative of violent insurrectionists. That's what they tried to get out of the Coots border blockade. And I feel like Diagolon, that goofy, white nationalist group was trying to, I think they were trying to give that narrative of January 6th. And I think citizen journalists stopped that from happening. Anyways, not only was it the news story of the year, because it really broke the fever about the lockdowns and the vax mandates, but look what it did to the Conservative Party. It hastened the exit of that dud Erin O'Toole and brought in Pierre Poilievre, I think the best hope the party's had since Stephen Harper, and may, God willing, in the long term even exceed Stephen Harper. In a way, the Trucker Convoy gave us Pierre Poilievre, don't you think?
Yes, it very much is the case. And I wrote in that book about the Freedom Convoy that, yes, the convoy had set out to basically have Justin Trudeau be its political casualty, but its political casualty was really Erin O'Toole. And later on, you could argue Jason Kenney as well. But I think that was an important moment. And the Conservatives realized that they did not want to be and could not be on the wrong side of history on that. And I think that really drove what happened in that leadership race, which culminated in September of 2022 and brought us Pierre Poilievre, but also people that he has around him, that he hasn't relegated to the back benches, that are up front in his government. Leslyn Lewis is a great example of this. So I'm actually feeling really good right now about where things are. And I think that's really the recurring theme I've gotten as I've talked to prospective voters, is that for the first time in years, people are feeling good to be a conservative. They're feeling good about their beliefs, good about their values, and not like this is some dirty little secret they need to hide. They're out and proud and saying, yeah, we want to get rid of Justin Trudeau.